Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Thank you, Bruce, for giving me this opportunity to come on the show here. My name is Anthony Carlston. I'm with Shooting Edge, and you've probably seen us around. We've been in the industry as Shooting Edge for 9 years. Our founder of our company is my dad. His name is Marvin Carlston. If you're familiar with the archery industry, you've probably heard of Marvin by means of Gold Tip. He was the owner and founder of Gold Tip Arrows and the man responsible for bringing us the modern carbon arrow as we know it. And so he's been in the industry since 87. And as a mechanical engineer, Marvin found an extreme need to protect our customers, not from products that were defective, but from accidents. Bruce, have you ever seen those injuries that you see on the Facebook where somebody gets an arrow in the hand? Have you come across those?
I've seen more rifle or shotgun industries, but yes, I have seen some people that have impaled themselves in various parts of their body with their bow. Yeah,
right. And people, really rare accidents where somebody gets it in the upper part of the body, chest or the face. But most common, the injuries that we see that Marvin and I was most concerned about was injuries that directly resulted to an impact of the arrow into the back of the hand. As an engineer myself, I served as a quality control manager at Gold Tip from about 2003 to 2009. And when my dad and I retired from Gold Tip, I also worked there in the manufacturing side at Gold Tip for multiple years before then. So I was very intimate in the process of how arrows were built and obviously the quality side of them. We found that we couldn't build a better product with the technology that's available. That's still the same story today. There's not a better way to address the issue because the product is amazing right now. You can't get a better arrow out there. But as you know, you could drive a nice Mercedes-Benz and still have an accident, right? You got to wear your safety equipment. And so if you're driving a vehicle like that and you don't have a seatbelt on, you're going to get hurt. And that's what we've seen. And as somebody that loves the sport, somebody that's been raised in archery since I was 5, I've been shooting a bow for 31 years now. And I've found that, you've got to do everything you can to not only shoot better, but protect yourself from accidents. And archery is very safe. We've got less than a 3% chance of an overall injury. As we discovered these injuries, we came across a government website where they tracked injuries that people get into the emergency room, and they result in about 1,100 emergency room visits a year in the United States. And so that's when Marvin and I said, hey, we got to do something. Bruce and I wanted to introduce you guys to the ProTx Hand Guard. He's got one on, I got one on, and this is a super cool glove. It's fingerless because if you're like me, you like to feel the riser of your bow as you're shooting, have control of the arrows and everything as well. So we got that as well. The benefits of a lightweight shooting glove that I love is the accuracy side. The safety of the 3 layers of Kevlar on the back of the hand is just a bonus. I'll give you a little bit of history. I was being trained to shoot professionally. My goal at the time was to join the U.S. archery team and participate on that level. And my coach and I was shooting on the range at Gold Tip, and he kept telling me, Anthony, you're torquing the bow. You're torquing the bow. And I'm like, how am I torquing the bow? I'm shooting the best I was shooting, And he's like, you're torquing the bow just enough. Your left to right movement on the target was not quite perfect yet. And he's like, you need to wear a glove. And this particular gentleman, I won't mention his name on here, but a lot of us probably have seen him wear a glove when he's been out shooting professionally. But he introduced me to a glove. Him and I are polar opposites in size. And he's like about 6'8". He gave me his extra large glove to wear. This is a small hand. And he's like, put the glove on. And I'm like, how's that going to help? And I put it on. It was just a blue polyester glove that you wear, when you're snowmobiling or underneath the glove liner glove. And I put it on, and instantly I noticed my left to right movement on the target improved, and the torque was nearly gone, depending on how I held the bow at that point. And so we realized, the having a smooth palm material, as Bruce, as you can see, that palm on that glove is really smooth, right? And it's very thin. And so you don't want it too smooth because you don't want your bow to come out, but you need to have very thin material there so it doesn't bulk. You don't need a big winter glove. And so that's what we did, is we designed it off of that so that we can have that consistent contact when we shoot. And so the accuracy, a lot of guys have a perception issue when you pick up a glove. Is it going to actually work? What's your thoughts on a glove at this point, Bruce, from what you've seen?
Well, I like it, one, because it fits. Reminds me a lot of my Fox gloves that I use on my mountain bike. Mm-hmm. The Kevlar, I think I shoot a crossbow. I don't shoot a compound. But when I lay that down, if it's going to be close to the ground, it's going to be a barrier. I'm not worried with the crossbow of an arrow coming back at me. It could happen, but I'm not worried about that. But it's comfortable. That's what I can say.
It's comfortable. And one of the benefits it has, too, you've probably seen doctors prescribe people like a wrist supporting device. Like if you hurt your wrist, you go grab them at Walgreens or from a chiropractor or like a sports therapist doctor. And the material on the palm here is like a nylon polyester material. It's the same type of material you'd find on those supportive gloves. And it actually kind of massages your hand as you wear it. It helps reduce fatigue. One of the concerns archers have, and I've experienced this a lot over the years, when I shoot, my hand would get fatigued right there. Right in that area there. Maybe it could get red, it could get bruised. It didn't get a lot of bruising, but it gets sore. And the reason it gets sore is because your hand's trying to guide that bow into the natural position center of your hand, right? And that bow handle kind of slides on that muscle and it gets a little sore. And so the glove actually prevents that soreness, and it can actually relieve it if it has occurred, which is super cool. And it just protects your hands too when you're out in the woods. We don't have a matching glove for this hand yet, but you can wear another shooting glove or just glove on that hand. A lot of guys prefer to have this hand open if you're shooting with a release, though. So that's why we haven't covered the right hand yet at this point. So we're just focusing on this hand here. So let's talk a little bit about some of the stories. You guys are probably wondering, how does this benefit shooters? Have you heard of a gal by the name of Joella Bates?
No.
So she's an Olympic coach now. She's been shooting archery her entire life. And she has experimented with different levels of equipment. She currently shoots a bare bow right now, but she shot compound over the last 9 years with us. And now the last about 3-4 years, she's been shooting specifically bare bow. We've had her on staff for 9 years. She's won 5 world titles with the glove, 3 with the compound bow, and 2 with her bare bow. And the neat thing about her journey, she's in her 50s now. And in 2007, she qualified for the U.S. archery team. As you can imagine, at that level, in her life, that was a huge accomplishment. And she contributes to her success, not only to, her style of shooting, but her ability to perform has increased because of the accuracy of the improvements of the glove. And one of the things she noticed, I'll share a quote with you guys. You'll find this quote on our website as well. But she says that the incredible thing that I found this summer is that when it was hot and I was sweating, the glove allowed my hand to stay in perfect position in the handle of my recurved bow. And I took my CD bow and the CD archery riser and the ProTx glove and repeatedly won tournament after tournament, including 2 world championships. When everybody else is hot and sweaty and complaining about how nasty it feels outside, I'm wearing a glove and they're looking at me like I'm crazy. And I was crazy in love with the results. It really improved my accuracy, and that is a real bonus. By the way, accuracy is a key. If you want to shoot more accurately, especially in the summer, when there's sweating, you need to put on a ProTx Hand Guard. It keeps your hand perfectly placed in the riser, shot after shot. And so, you've probably experienced this throughout your life, Bruce. Even right now, your palms might be sweaty if you're nervous, right? As you're working, your palms get sweaty. When you're shooting a bow, your hand's going to have a different feel on the bow each time, and it's going to affect how you shoot. And so what we've found is that the glove provides consistent contact, regardless of whether you're in the middle part of the day or first thing in the morning when it's cooler. Your hand's going to control that moisture on your hand with the glove. It's going to keep that consistent contact so you get that sweet spot shot after shot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Anthony, you mentioned your website earlier. How do people get to your website?
So it's just shootingedge.com. We're rebuilding the website, so there'll be some quick links right to the product. And there'll be obviously some more stories of Joella's success. And we've got a bunch of videos of her talking about the benefits of the product on there that really get us in line to exactly how she's found, that this really improves the accuracy.
Now, one of the things that we talked about before is, okay, I get the target hunting. What's the crossover to people in the field and that are hunting?
One of the things I love about as a bow hunter, that's where I invest my time. That's where I've had the most success over the years. I mean, target archery is fun. Don't get me wrong, but I love to get behind my bow and go bow hunting. And as a bow hunter, a lot of us don't have a lot of time to really invest in shooting well. And that's our goal, is to make an ethical, perfect shot each time. So when we harvest an animal, we want to make sure we do it quickly. We want to make sure we have the best shot placement. And I found that with my glove on, and if I haven't had a lot of time to practice right before, I'm going to continue to shoot very accurately because the glove gives me really that much more of an edge, while I'm out in the field. Because you're going to encounter rain, you're going to encounter snow, you're going to encounter different conditions. If you got a bare hand, it's going to be either really, really dry, which means your bow's going to not be in the right spot, or it could be sweaty and moist, right? And the glove helps control all of that. And so as a bow hunter, you want to have the easiest way to make the most accurate shot possible as you are out in the field, depending on what you're going after. Now, the other thing I've noticed too, like Bruce and I do a lot of hunting out here in Utah, and I'm in some remote areas of the country, right? And I gave the glove to a gentleman by the name of Jim Shockey. We've probably all heard of Jim Shockey. And his first response was, "Hey, you just given me the Michael Jackson glove." And he looked at it and he's like, that glove makes sense because of the areas where him and I hunt. If an accident happens, a simple injury to the hand may not be life-threatening, in the city, right, where you can get down to the emergency room attention and get some help. But if something happens in the areas where Jim and I hunt, that could be life-threatening. Some of the areas I'm 3-4 hours away from emergency room, medical attention. If there was an accident, that could end it, right? And there's nothing worse than pulling back on a big animal and, your arrow breaks and you miss it. But if the arrow breaks and you get it in your hand, you're in far worse condition, right? And so that's why we got the benefits of the accuracy and then the protection on the back. Because as a bow hunter, I mean, you've got so many things that could go wrong. You could have fallen on your equipment. Maybe as you were traveling through the woods to your tree stand, you had an accident. Things got shook up in travel. Whatever happened, you pull back and there was an issue with the arrow before you shot. We'll go through some inspection processes. Bruce, have you talked a lot about how to inspect arrows before when you shot your equipment with your bows or your crossbow?
My guess, I haven't got tech, and I'm doing Tech Wednesdays coming up this year. So This is apropos to what we're doing. So why don't you talk about how to figure out, because I just had a friend who was in Africa and she shot over blessed buck. And when she let the arrow go, she heard an explosion. And that was caused simply because the arrow was fractured. It was an invisible fracture.
Yeah.
And so at release, all those physics at work, I'll just say it that way, and it just blew the arrow up, and that was that.
Right. And a lot of issues, I'm sure if we were to inspect that, as an engineer or have that arrow sent to Marvin, we would find the multiple things that could have happened. It could have been impacted prior to the shot, meaning in travel, maybe it got bumped up against something, it got hit. Maybe as she was shooting, it got hit, right? And got hit by another arrow. Maybe she bounced it off a rock. Something impacted it. And when she shot, the paradox of the bow causes it to bend, and that's what came apart. In most cases, though, we find that the issues of an arrow after the customer has inspected it if they break at that point, it's because an issue happened with the nocking point. Meaning the nock serving is wore out, it's too loose. They didn't seat the nock. How sometimes you have a double click on your nock when you go to nock the string? Your nock should click twice and be firmly attached to the string. Maybe it wasn't fully attached. And when she pulled back, you're pulling back on an animal, so a lot of things can go wrong there because you're not focusing, right? You're excited. You got buck fever going on, and so that just really affects your ability to think anyways. And, maybe when she pulled back, she didn't have the nock seated all the way, so when she shot, imagine with me for a moment, the string falls, and the arrow falls off the string. Going to re-engage the string 3 or 4 inches below the nocking point, and that's going to send your arrow right into the back of the riser. Perfectly good arrow. And we've seen that happen time after time. I remember the first couple cases that we received down at Gold Tip when customers would send in their bow. We got a bow that came into the shop, and all the pins were knocked out of the sight window, Bruce. All the pins were broke out. And Marvin and I looked at it and got, how on earth did they break off the pins out of their sight window? And we looked for impacts, because sometimes you can imagine if you get an arrow through your hand, because this customer had that happen, they had an arrow through their hand, they dropped their bow, and we thought maybe when they dropped the bow, it broke the pins in the sight, where there was no impact marks representing an impact from a fall, right? From the bow being dropped. There was a tiny little impact mark on the inside of the sight window. And so we had a theory that maybe the arrow somehow had gotten caught and went through the sight window in mid-flight. And it wasn't until we were working with a gentleman by the name of Wade Nolan doing some broadhead testing that we actually caught an arrow break in slow motion. And the arrow re-engaged the string. We had it on a hooter shooter. The arrow re-engaged the string 3 or 4 inches down, and the front part of the arrow went through the sight window and broke out the pins and had broken that area. And then had we had a hand there, the arrow would have impacted, where a person's hand would have been. If you go to our YouTube videos, you'll see some similar videos of where other people have caught arrows break in slow motion by accident, where it's buckling and going towards the hand. And a lot of times it's because of that knocking point. Now, if you don't inspect an arrow prior to your shot, if you get on our website, we've got some, good inspection videos. Gold Tip has a really good inspection video that they put together that they talk about the 360 bend test. But you just have to bend test the arrow, bend it multiple times in multiple directions. I don't have it in here, I apologize, but imagine, bending it like this. You're going to listen for sounds, look for fractures. Some people will carry a cloth with them or a cotton ball and run it across the shaft and see if you can get the fibers of your cotton ball to catch onto the broken part of the shaft. Because sometimes, like your friend, you're going to see an invisible fracture in the arrow that may not be visible until you shoot it, right? But sometimes with a small, thing like a cotton ball or a cloth, you can catch those edges and expose the fracture that way as well. That's what I do in the field too. I carry a little cloth or cotton ball and try to capture that. But always inspect your arrows. Make sure your nock is not loose. A lot of times we see an arrow where, have you seen your arrows where they get cracks on the back of the nock? Not on the nock itself, but right on the shaft. Have you seen those before, Bruce?
Right.
And so that right there is one that we need to, look at and make sure the nocking point doesn't have any cracks on the nock or where it goes into the shaft. And then make sure the ears of the nock aren't bent. A lot of times we get customers call us up and go, hey, my arrow broke. And then they come and tell us, well, my arrow fell out of the truck. In fact, I'll tell you a story of a gentleman. We had a guy out here that runs a successful archery shop, and he had drawn a once limited entry bull elk tag. And he had gotten into his area, opened up the door of his truck, and his bow fell out.
Oh, no.
And he had his quiver attached to his bow, and the arrows hit the ground, and the nocks were just slightly bent, right? So he re-straightened them and went on his way. And as he's working that hunt, he called in this bull elk. He pulls back on the bull elk, pulled the trigger, and boom, just like your friend described, dynamite went off, right?
Right.
And he's sitting there going, I'm a professional. I do this for a living, right? What happened? Thankfully, the arrow missed his hand. It went down range, but he missed an animal of a lifetime, right? And then he's thinking about it going, well, I re-straightened my nocks. My nocks were broken, right? And so I always tell customers, never reshoot a nock that's been damaged from another arrow or bent. If it's bent, throw it away. Just get rid of it and, put a new nock on. And
wow, that's lessons learned for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to insert this now. Folks, Anthony has a special for you if you're listening to the show from Whitetail Rendezvous Gear Tech. And if you want to purchase their glove, what's your special for anybody listening to the show?
Yeah, normally the manufacturer's suggested retail price is $44.95. So you'll see them listed on the website for $39.95. So for participating in the podcast here today, we'll go ahead and give you that glove at $35.
Does that include shipping?
So it'd be $35 plus shipping. So,
okay.
And in the continental U.S., it's about $3 to ship.
Okay, great. So folks, just mention that you heard Anthony's talk about the ProTek glove and you're going to get a discount, and go ahead and buy the glove because safety is critically important. I've got a friend that is going to come up with a story about his climber and what happened to him, and he lived, but it was sketchy. And archery, we gain habits, we climb, we set up we shoot, and we really don't think about what happens. Well, every year, as you heard Anthony say, what was it, 11,000 people go to emergency room?
1,100.
1,100, pardon me.
Yeah.
Which still is a lot of people, that have accidents in regards to just arrows. That's just arrows, right?
When the emergency room documents an injury, so when you come in and you're in the emergency room and you've got an arrow in your hand, they're going to document that as an injury to the hand, right? Maybe you've got a cut from a vein, or you just kind of slivers in your hand. That also results in those numbers as well. And the glove will prevent all those things from happening. And so that's why we encourage it. I've got one story that, really has been quite close to me. That sounds that most of the viewers here will be hunting whitetails from a tree stand, right?
Right.
And we've got a guy coming on where he's going to share his story of falling out of a tree stand.
Right.
I met this guy briefly. When I met him, he was 23, 24 years old. And I'm from Ohio. And he had shot a whitetail buck out of his tree stand. And the arrow had passed halfway through, right? And he went and retrieved his arrow. His arrow looked fine. He cleaned the blood off of it, put it back in his quiver, right? 2 weeks later, he had shot another whitetail. He was up in his tree stand. And as he's pulling back, he pulled the trigger. And he's just, every story I hear, it always sounds like dynamite. Explosion happened. The arrow exploded. The impact of the arrow hit the back of his hand. And the force of that impact threw him from the tree stand. And thankfully, he was wearing a safety harness. So he didn't hit the ground, but he was in a climber. He had to pull himself back up on his platform with one hand to call for help. And if you're in a safety harness, you got about 7 minutes or so before you start to lose severe circulation to your legs. And so you have to get up and on the platform or on the ladder and back to ground. And so that was the worst case scenario that we've had. Thankfully, he didn't hit the ground, but that could have ended in somebody's life at that point, And he later realized that the arrow was broken, but was never aware of how to inspect an arrow. And so one of the things we're encouraging folks to do, you can go to our website called bowsafe.com, and on there you'll find instructions on how to inspect arrows and why we should be wearing our safety harnesses, our arm guards, and our hand guards. All those things are designed to keep us in the field longer, right? There's nothing worse than having somebody get hurt, end up in a wheelchair, somebody get hurt with an arrow in their, hand. Not a life-threatening injury by any means, but, imagine with me for a moment when I do a training with folks, I'll go around and I'll shake hands with as many people in that training as I can. And I'll pay attention to the hands I shake, and then I'll ask that person, hey, can you come forward for a moment? I noticed something with your hand, right? And what I'm looking for when I shake people's hands that are archers is the feeling of the graphite sliver or carbon sliver working their way slowly out of your hand. And you'd think, why would that be the case, right? Well, graphite is not X-rayable. So if you got large graphite slivers in your hand from an arrow, the doctor either has to do one or two things. Leave it in there or perform an exploratory surgery to get it out because they don't know where it's at. So they're going to gather what they can see, and then the rest they're either going to leave in or with your permission, basically dig through your hand to get as much of that out as you can. And most people's experience has been as slivers. I've seen guys 3-4 years later with slivers still working their way out of their hand. And that's going to be coming out of the palm of your hand or your back, and which makes it very hard to shoot at that point, right? And then the worst part you experience with is the PTSD of, hey, is this going to be the next time this injury occurs? And so what we're trying to encourage people to do is, you and I do a lot of gun shooting, right?
Yes.
And so the first thing that we're always required to do when we're shooting on a range is wear our hearing protection and their eye protection. And so what we're trying to encourage customers to do is just get in the habit. Wear a ProTx Hand Guard every time you shoot and wear your arm guard. And if you're in a tree stand, wear a safety harness. If we do those three things and then understand our equipment, right? You shoot a crossbow, understand the limitations of the crossbow. When you're shooting, with your bow, understand the limitations of your bow. Make sure you know how to inspect your bow and make sure you know how to inspect your arrows so that you don't have an accident, right? I've had incidences with crossbows. I got 7 staples right on the top of my head with the crossbow. And I've been shooting crossbows for years as well. And my story with the crossbow, I was cocking it like I've done hundreds of times off of a gun rest, which isn't recommended, by the way, but it's never failed me. But I was recovering from Lyme's disease, so I was weaker than normal. And as I was pulling it back, I almost had it to the power curve, but I had to put my foot up on my bench I was sitting on, and it changed the angle, and the stock of the crossbow come out, and the scope got me right in the back of the head, right in the butt of the hat. And that's the only time I've ever had a bleeding injury, from any sort of archery equipment. But I've hit my arm multiple times over the years where I just wear an arm guard. I correct it, but I always wear an arm guard because that, even a bruise on the hand, could be ending your day, right? I was at a 3D pop-up tour, the first time I've ever seen blood occur on an archery range. We had a gentleman, probably in his 60s, been shooting longer than I've been alive. He had a knock break on his arrow, and he got hit right there in his arm, and the knock went into his arm about a half an inch. I was there as a range officer. When I arrived to him, I looked at the hole thinking, usually when you get an arrow right here, the arrow comes out the palm of your hand, right? And I looked at it and went, that's a clean hole. And I'm looking for the arrow going, well, the arrow's not in his hand, thankfully. But when we found the arrow, the knock was broke off right at the back of the arrow. And the knock and the string had hit his arm. So he had the string bruise from the string slap, and then he had an arrow in a hole in his arm.
From the knock.
From the knock, yep.
Yeah.
Had he been wearing a simple arm guard, and this is a guy that hadn't worn an arm guard in probably 40 years, right? Had he been wearing an arm guard at that event, he would have never, one, been embarrassed in front of a crowd that was waiting for Ted Nugent, because this was at the Hunt Expo in Salt Lake City when this happened. And so they had bleachers set up to watch this event. And he had bruised himself in front, caused that injury in front of that crowd, right? And so he had that happen as well. I've seen him happen personally. I've had him happen to myself. So everybody's subject to the same thing. And so our advice is try to protect yourself, have fun. Archery's safe. I'm not going to be the first one to say you shouldn't participate because it's not safe. Archery is the safest sport we can participate in. But have you ever played football, Bruce?
Yes.
So what's the requirements? Like if you get on the field for football, you're going to have to wear a helmet and pads, right?
Right, and mouth guard.
And a mouth guard. And hopefully you're conditioning yourself, right? You're in a good physical shape to go play. And so that's what we're encouraging guys to do. Practice as often as you can, get to know your equipment, and just have fun. And one of the things I love about telling people about the stories of the glove, when you and I talked earlier, when I first developed the glove, I had just some local shooter guys that weren't having extreme success with their bows, but they had bought the best equipment available at the time, right? And I went back and forth with these guys multiple times, a gentleman by the name of Matt and Ben, and I said, guys, I know you're shooting well, but the reason you're not getting on the podium in your events, and these are just amateur type local events, and I said, the reason you're not podium is because you still got some torque issues with the bow, right? You've worked out everything else. You got the best equipment. You're practicing a lot. Both the guys have targets in their yards, big outdoor ranges where they can shoot well enough to practice. And I said, if you put a glove on, we can improve your score for your circuit about 20 to 30 points, right? And the first time I give them the glove, both of them were shooting a 3D pop-up event where targets move on the machines. And this tournament, had the tournament finished Saturday, they would have finished probably like 6th and 9th, right? When they put the glove on, by the time they finished Sunday, one had finished 1st and the other had finished 3rd for the first time, ever shooting a bow. And the only thing they had done differently was put a glove on.
Isn't that amazing? Just that little different, just that little glove.
Just a little difference.
And you have to prove it to yourself. And you can go to the website, Shooter's Edge website, and find videos and testimonials. But at this time in the show, I want to remind everybody, if you decide to buy a glove, you get it for $35 just by mentioning Whitetail Rendezvous. So in closing, how do you want to wrap this up, Anthony?
One of the things we want to do is, and we're going to do a 30-30 challenge that we're going to introduce on our new website, where we're going to challenge everybody to try the glove out, right? And so what we're looking for is we want you to take 30 shots over probably a 2 or 3 day period without the glove into a Vegas-style 3-spot target and document the results of shooting without the glove. Shoot through some paper, do like a paper tune without the glove and document those results. Take some pictures or a video of it and say, okay, here's my 30 shots in the 3-spot target face. here's what my score would have been without the glove. And then we want to take and do the same thing with the glove over a 3 or 4 day period, shooting 30 arrows in the 3 different target faces on the same target and 3 different spots, shoot through the paper test, and then document those results. And what we're looking for is we want to see how much people are going to actually improve from the hand, bare hand, to the glove. And then we want to graph that and say, okay, if you're an amateur guy from the age of 20 to 30, and you consider yourself an amateur archer based off of how many people we take a sample from, this is what you could expect to see your performance improve on. So people feel confident moving into it. Now, here's a funny fact. I've gone back to my buddy Matt and Ben, and I said, hey guys, can you participate in this 30-30 challenge with me? And they're like, Anthony, I can't shoot without the glove. When before they're like, I don't want to shoot with the glove. I think it's going to interfere my shot. And now they're like, I don't want to not take the glove off and shoot. They have to wear the glove to shoot now because of, 1, how comfortable it is, and 2, their performance, right? And that's, my dad and I are the same way. We won't shoot without the glove because of the performance. You know, safety is just a bonus, but it's all about the performance. It's all about shooting better and doing it very simply. And one of the other things I learned when I was training I spent 4 weeks training our U.S. archery guys, and I tried to get them to wear the glove on the Olympic archery courses, okay? And they came back to me and said, Anthony, we can't wear that glove or a glove in general because it will disqualify us. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of silly because it's safety, but you're going to shoot better. And they're like, that's the point. We will shoot so well as Olympic archers that nobody will be able to compete with each other. We'll all be shooting the exact same if we wear a glove. And so that's when I realized there is a point to the accuracy that the U.S. Olympic archery teams have said, we won't allow a shooter to wear a shooting glove because they will shoot better than everybody else. And so to keep everybody competitive, they're not allowed to wear the gloves on that circuit. So as bow hunters, we can look to that and go, hey, look, we need all the advantages we can get. Those guys have proven that this does shoot better. We've proven it here as professionals as well that it does shoot better. So that's why we want to do that 30-30 challenge to help you guys see that as well.
And you can find that 30-30 challenge on sportsmanedge.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, shootingedge.com, right here on the hat.
Okay, and 30-30 challenge. So sign up for that. Anthony, it's been a joy having you on the first edition of 2019 Tech Wednesday. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.